The Becoming Unsilenced podcast is about awakening to the greatest potential you always were. Listen to teachings, interviews, and inspiring stories of others who have challenged the accepted, expanded possibility, and merged modern day life with ancient wisdom to discover their greatest potential. When you become fearless, you become limitless. Now be inspired by today's episode.
Well, welcome, Janet, to season 2 of the Becoming Unsilenced podcast, and welcome, audience, to you. If you're not familiar with the Becoming Unsilenced podcast yet, we thank you for being here today. And our mission really is to grow and nurture a community of women internationally who are confident in raising their voices, speaking up, and living their life in alignment with their true authenticity. We're going to talk today about a little bit about the 5 top ways that women are silenced in our culture today. And they're just FYI, there is a little short episode on that alone that you can go check out that was released a couple weeks ago. So I'm going to welcome my co-host, Janet Hudson. She is a coach and owner of Tame the Chaos Coaching. And if you followed last season, you know that Janet was a regular guest and co-host with me on this podcast. And so thanks for being here again this season, Janet.
Thank you for having me, Vicki. I love it.
Yeah, we've had kind of a fun summer of conversation and growth while the podcast was on break. And so I'm excited to dive back in today. But our topic today is we're going to explore what was the catalyst for our personal growth for each of us, and kind of what did that look like, and then how has that impacted ourselves, our own belief and confidence in ourselves. How's it impacted our family? How's it impacted our work? And how are we leading the way for others in that work? And then we're going to, the second half, we're going to really dive into what were the nuts and bolts things that we did along the way that helped us grow and develop and to be where we're at today. So are you ready to dive into this conversation?
Yes.
Awesome.
Containing it is going to be the challenge with that big entree. But
yes. Well, you are the Tame the Chaos, Janet. So along the way, you can feel free to guide us and steer us in the direction so we don't get our chaos unfolding. But I'm just going to start here with sharing these top 5 things. And then as we share each of a little bit of our stories and our journeys, I think we can kind of reference which one of these was like impactful in a life for each of us. So the top 5 ways that I've seen throughout my own coaching work, throughout my own experience, that women are silenced today. And by silenced, I'm meaning they're operating based on fear, unresolved trauma from the past, fear of the future, regret of the past, unresolved trauma, not from their highest, greatest potential. And when we become unsilenced, it's when we can truly operate from hope, joy, love, and from that centered place inside of us. So top 5 ways are self-doubt, past trauma that's still lingering out there. And trauma doesn't have to be a big thing. It can be a little thing or it can be a big thing. Religion, our culture, and then family patterns and cycles. Okay, so we're going to just hold that out there. And I'm going to defer to you first, Janet. Like, what started you on this kind of personal journey of transforming and silencing your own life?
Well, I really will try to kind of pick the big picture aspects, because I think it's a journey that wasn't clarified until I'd been on it for a while. And I don't think I would have given it the name personal growth, but because in the beginning it felt like survival. I am in this deep crisis. a deep crisis, and I've got to get my head above water. I've got to find a landing place. But by the process of doing that, kind of getting out of the crisis into a landing place, I picked up some things along the way. And I think I did that a number of ways in my 20s and 30s. And part of that involved just getting an education, getting out of a horrible, abusive marriage, navigating having children, all of those things. I was just deeply conditioned. And when crisis came, working out of them. And I think it was only much later that I could see that all of this was personal growth. And probably the key thing for having a self-conscious awareness of that was I was just could be paralyzed by procrastination, just this intense need to perform, to do well, to hide the fact that it was hard for me, just the pressure, and addressing that in a real way. And I read this book called The Power of Habit. And it was like, oh my gosh, this is me. And that really helped me begin to say, oh, wow, I'm not, I'm not flawed. This is a part of what it means to be human. This makes sense from lots and lots of reasons. And it was beginning to kind of work through that. And then, of course, I was a chaotic person. I kind of didn't have a good sense of order. And it was coming to see that I didn't have to have that label of myself. I could actually create some new habits, and I could create order for myself. I could change. It was amazing. And I think it was obvious the way it affected me because I began to have less stress in my life. Began to make accomplishments. I could see order. But for the people around me, it also had a very important effect because, you could find things weren't so crazy. I wasn't. And, the emotional volatility, I think, are some obvious ways.
Yeah,
How about you?
that's fantastic. Yeah, so I love how you said this whole journey. Yeah, I think I kind of heard you distinguish the conscious point where you were the conscious turning point. And I'd say, it's very similar for me that when I look back, much of my life was steering me, creating circumstances that steered me up to that moment in time when it kind of did become a conscious choice for growth. And for me, it was when I went through a divorce and I really at that point in time looked at myself and saw some things that I was like, wow, I don't want my kids to repeat these things. There were some things about our family situation that I didn't want them to repeat, kind of going back to those family and generational patterns, one of the top 5 ways people are silenced. And so I decided that I was going to do everything I could to teach my kids a different way. And I'm not sure what triggered me in that moment to know that I had to do that for myself first, that I couldn't, just kind of magically change something for them if I wasn't serious about it for me. So it was really from that moment that I think before that, my journey looked very chaotic. It was a very much of a survival mode, as you described yours as well, a fighting through a lot of difficult circumstances within my marriage, difficult financial circumstances. And that moment of awakening, I would say I just knew in that moment that I had to do something different. I didn't know what that was or what that looked like. And I would have never guessed in that moment that it would have led us here today. But over bit by bit, I began to see my own pattern and habit of codependency, of passive communication, and being kind of tied to some unhealed things that had happened in my childhood, which ties back to the religion point of silencing. And the self-doubt, I had a ton of doubt in myself and constantly second guessing. And so as I went on this journey, the change it made internally for me think was similar to what you said, the rising of the waves and oceans of emotions. I was able to also to settle to. It's interesting that you tied it back to habits also, because I can distinctly think there are some different habits, things that we engaged in our home to bring more peace and order to the family, and really did have a settling effect for me, a focusing effect for me. And certainly over the years of that change, made a significant difference in my kids' lives and the trajectory that I could see that they were headed. And then, of course, eventually in my work, I knew that I loved my work that I did, but eventually it no longer, I could feel this greater capacity that I had to do something more. And then that becomes another journey of growth, because it's frustrating. It's like, I know I can do more, but what is that? And that becomes its own journey of expansion. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
It's amazing how it is that as you expand, at first, you need to have something that can help you survive. But as you expand, you see a broader horizon, you see new possibilities, and yet you're bumping up against new challenges. And so then you have to expand. And I think as you get out, it's the deep irony is some of the very strategies that helped you initially, now all of a sudden it's time to let go of those too and begin to embrace some new ones. And for me, for so much of my early adult life, I had no order. Everything was just kind of chaotic. Then I began to create order, and that was amazing. And then I realized I was relying too much on that controlling my environment, and I needed to loosen up on that. So it's so interesting how there is not a formula. There is not this set of things that we can do. Yeah, they work, but they work in a context. And as we grow, the more we address the self-doubt, the more we heal the traumas, then we begin to realize, hey, I have a voice. I may not even realize that heaviness of my conditioning, of those traumas, of that self-doubt had silenced me. And then beginning to expand more and more. So seeing the layers of it is always exciting.
Yeah. So I know we're going to talk a little bit about some specific things that helped us along the way, but if you could pinpoint one or two things for you that have been kind of transformational, what would you say?
Well, it always seemed to be introduced to a concept I'd never heard before, kind of a teaching I was unfamiliar with, that probably challenged beliefs that I grew up with. And when I began to open myself up to the possibility that maybe some of those new ideas, new ways of seeing the world had some truth in them, once I could begin to experiment with that, then I began to say, oh my goodness, I really could grow and change. So I think it was being introduced to new ideas, new possibilities. And that, there are many, many layers of that. I could point to tons of them, but many of them are come out of research base about how the human brain works. All of the stuff we're learning about that, the complexity of that, and how that shapes us, and how that creates possibilities for us, and how those live in tension with each other.
Yeah. So what did it feel like when you stretched into those new ideas and concepts?
Well, I began to say, I always thought I was this kind of person. I always had that language of I'm this kind of person. And then when I realized all of a sudden, I was not the same person. At 30, I was not the same person I was in my early 20s. And in my mid 30s, I wasn't even the same person then. And that kind of planted this seed of, wow, if I can make these changes, if I can do these things I never thought were possible, what else could it be? As you said, it creates that energy of possibility. But every time that happens, you bump up against a challenge. And you
Yeah,
need support whenever
that's
you bump
right.
up against that challenge.
That's right. And that support is critical. So let's kind of shift into that, because we wanted to talk about, for each of us, what were the things that we found super valuable along the way. So what support was valuable for you along the way?
Coaching was one of the truly transformational experiences. I can remember a time when I didn't even know what that was. Um, and when I had my first coach, it was like, oh my goodness, imagine that there's this person in my life who is only focused on my growth and is working with me exactly where I am at this moment, who's not teaching me, who's not training me, who's not telling me I need to do it this way, but is really working with me, helping me uncover the things that are blocking me. Just having that experience. And now I've had actually many different coaching experiences and realize many of them are different from that first experience. But coaching, that one-on-one experience has been deeply transformational.
Yeah. So for someone who is like you, who doesn't know what a coach is, or doesn't work with one, or hasn't worked with one, and they just heard a little bit of that description that you gave there of the transformation that it had for you. What's a first coaching session like for someone who has never experienced it before?
I find that they often even use the word mentor. They're somehow expecting you to tell them what to do. And that's an expectation. So they come with you, they come either resenting the fact that you're going to tell them what to do, and there's a defensiveness, or they come ready. Okay, tell me what to do. And when there's this realization, hey, this is a partnership. There'll be times when I'd love to give you some guidance, but let's not get there until we know what exactly is needed. And helping them see there's deep wisdom within themselves. And you better than I do. And I think one of the best ways I can help you is help you see how you're thinking about this particular issue. Because if you can see how you're thinking about it, you could maybe discover that's not the only way to think about it. There are many others. And then we can partner together to find a new way of thinking about it. So I think it's never exactly what people think it's going to be, but when they discover what it really can be, it's a deeply powerful thing. How about you?
Yeah, I was going to say, when I discovered coaching, it was kind of like I was the parched desert, and that was the water on
Mm.
my soul. Um, I and I couldn't believe that I didn't know it existed. Up to that point in time, and I discovered coaching through a leadership, Sinovation Valley Leadership Academy, which one of my employees had asked to be part of. And I always encouraged personal growth and self development in the workplace. And so it was through that connection that I got introduced to my first coach. And she certainly set the bar high as far as coaches go for the future for me. But uh, that experience of having someone listen to you without judgment, without telling you what to do, without telling you what you do want to do is shameful or wrong or bad or unwise, and instead partnering with you to help you explore and expand what it would look like to create something different in your life. And not only what it would look like, what kind of support on the skill set to do that. And, I wouldn't have been in coaching, a trained coach, as quick as I became if I didn't have a coach helping me along the way. And I just always say, I think that coaching accelerates personal growth maybe 3 or 4 times for me, based, or maybe even more than that, based on if you were just kind of slogging through, working through things on your own. Do you think that
Yeah.
that's accurate for you?
Absolutely. And you and I love books. We've read so many. We love them. And that can be a way of self-learning, but it takes a long time to process these. You never exactly know which one seems most relevant for where you are. But by having this partner that works with you, that I think that's the key, meeting you where you are now and helping you get from that place to where you want to be. So yes, that acceleration of a partnership, and then having a success, building on it, not waiting for, okay, it's going to be 5 years. I stumbled across this, figured it out. Oh, now it's going to be another 2 or 3 years before this happens. It cuts down on that, those gaps between, successes.
Yeah, and feedback is one of the crucial things, because I just remember many coaching sessions where I had agreed to take an action in a direction, and then maybe it didn't turn out how I wanted it to, and I was able to go back with the coach and say, okay, this is kind of what unfolded, and I could reflect on then with the coach to see, oh, okay, I could have done this different or this different, and I would have had a result more aligned with the result I was looking for. And you have the partner of that co-creating that together, instead of just feeling like you're alone in the journey. Or I think the other mistake people make is they go ask for the advice and opinion of all their friends who've maybe never been in the situation, don't have any training or skill set to really I think friends are definitely a valuable resource, and I don't want to say that, but when you're dealing with some significant life changes and challenges and transitions, sometimes going and talking to a friend is like having them jump into the soup with you and kind of boil and stew in the soup, where working with a coach is like someone giving you a hand and pulling you up out of it so that you can actually see clearly what's happening.
Exactly. And I think sometimes even our very closest friends and partners, it's sometimes very hard to be deeply honest about something because we're afraid of what the repercussions might be down the road. That willingness to be vulnerable in a relationship that has many other connections. So there's something about a coach that empowers you to be deeply honest. I know sometimes I found myself like, I can't believe I was just so easily opened up around these areas that are so difficult. But I think having that trusted, confidential space of someone who is not going to judge what you say, and you learn that, how it just frees you to, and when you say something out loud, it's very different than when it runs in your head, as we know.
Absolutely.
Right?
And in the friend situation, if people are anything like me, I would select the friend to talk to who I knew would agree with me. not, the,
That's right.
not the one who would say, well, I don't know
I
if that's
know.
reality or not.
Exactly. Yeah, because a lot of times we don't want to be challenged. And of course, that's a part of coaching too, but it's in a deeply trusted space. And when there is a challenge, it's usually coming from a place where the coach really sees something in you that you don't quite see in yourself. And there's never an obligation. You never ever have to take the challenge, right? It's an opportunity that's
Yeah.
provided for you.
Well, so one-on-one coaching, it has been a powerful tool and resource for both of us. And the other aspect that has made a huge, huge impact and imprint in my own life is small groups of people coming together for mutual growth and supporting each other on the journey. And I say like spirited people, because I don't think that we all need to think alike. We don't need to be like minded, but I do find that when people who are desiring to go in a certain direction based on certain values and truths in their life, when they find those like spirited people, it can be a just an amazing space of growth, of safety, of trust, of finding new friends. And so I'm wondering what's your experience around that?
Absolutely. And watching, I mean, I feel like I learn from watching others. And so that helps, especially in a group context, feeling that support. Oftentimes, the groups I've been a part, there is something that everyone is interested in working past. And then there are multiple perspectives you get from. And that gets back to that acceleration. Whenever you can learn from others, you can actually maybe be in a context to watch them be coached and learn from that. When you can have that deep support. Remember, I told you earlier, I learned whenever there's a whole new way of seeing the world I hadn't thought about. When you bring a group of people together, somebody in there is going to see and understand things very differently from me. And it's just been amazing the things that have opened up for me because I chose to participate in a small group like that. Yeah, and the
Yeah.
bond that's there, you feel supported on the journey. You begin to realize that it's not just words, this is part of the human experience, but you see it lived out in other people's lives.
Yeah, and I want to distinguish here some differences. These aren't groups that just come together to have coffee together and talk and gossip and chat. These are intentional groups that come together to say to one provide unconditional support for each other, to in provide encouragement and accountability of saying, this is the direction that we're going in. And then having a group of people to help cheer you on in that direction. We just don't celebrate near enough in our world. So celebration of successes is so important too. I was first introduced to small groups like that in the Innovation Valley Leadership Academy, and our small groups met every 2 weeks. So I think there's some commonalities here. One, it's a group of people who commit to meet together. They commit to show up for each other and for themselves. And they do that for a long enough time that they become comfortable and vulnerable with each other. They feel safe in there. And then that's when you can really truly make some significant stretching and growth. And then I think you and I were a microcosm of that, because you and I have met weekly for what, almost 5 years?
5 years, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, which has become the base of an incredible friendship, an incredible partnership in the podcast, in some adventures and travels, and all sorts of different things.
Yeah, I think you outlined all the tremendous benefits from being a part of a group. It's another one of those accelerators of our own personal growth.
Yeah. Well, as we kind of wind out our own conversations today here, want to open up the opportunities that exist for our audience in participating in these types of things, because you don't have to go look anywhere else other than right here to find these things. As we launch this second season of the Becoming Unsilenced podcast, we're also launching what we're calling Unsilent Circles. And Unsilent Circles are small groups of people who come together for the mutual learning, growth, support, and encouragement, and to travel, to choose intentionally to travel together. And so if you're listening to this now and you think, wow, would love to find a space like that, people to travel. I'd love to find my Janet. That's what I joke about. And I guess it's not a joke, because our friendship has been so significant. I wish everybody had a Janet in their life.
And a Vicki.
Yeah. So you can find that in our community, and you can find one-on-one coaching, and you can find Unsilent Circles. And really for people who are really serious about their own growth and development, doing both at once is also a phenomenal supportive experience. So where do you get started in that? Well, one of the ways you can start is taking our Becoming Unsilenced quiz. So you can find that in the link of the show notes. You can go and take the quiz, and just to kind of get an assessment of where you're at. And it doesn't matter where you're at. Maybe you are just on the very beginning stages of this journey, or maybe you're in a space, like Janet and I, where we're more in the space of like leading the way for others now, because we have a full range of places for you to fit in no matter where your journey is at. So the one-on-one coaching, the Unsilent Circles, and then we have an ambassador community, which is really people who are serious about leading the way for others, helping others become unsilenced. And that's a very, very cool community there. So it's an exciting journey ahead. And yeah, what's your thoughts, Janet?
Well, where do we sign up?
Yeah,
That's
well, definitely you can go to the link below and take the quiz. You can also just pop in and schedule a quick conversation with me if you want to find out a little bit more. You can also go to our website at www.tslimits.com and see a little bit more about each of the services and the opportunities that you have to participate. So, yeah.
And Vicki, the way you laid it out, I think it's always so beautiful because it gives an opportunity to step in many different ways. Just take the quiz. That's simple. That's free. There's no obligations. It's for your learning, right? To get some insights for yourself. Or, you can step in with a group, and you don't have to ever commit at a high level because you have created this wealth of possibilities. It really is a beautiful way of meeting people who are really ready to be unsilenced in their own lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're not even quite ready to take the quiz, well, then you can hang out and listen to a few episodes of the podcast until you're ready to take the quiz.
Exactly.
So we're here to meet you, or whatever space of the journey is on you're on. So let's wind out with some evidence of the transformation that this journey has brought. And if you could offer a piece of evidence or wisdom on how this transformation has specifically affected you, your family, and your work, what would you share?
Well, I think it enabled me to leave a career of 25 years and start a new business. That feels like strong evidence. And I think it transformed for me the relationship with my adult children. And as in all long-term relationships, I think it has opened the door for growing intimacy and healing of those things that nag at us in a long-term relationship with my husband. So I felt those are high level, very tangible things that the results that have come in my life.
Yeah, I love that. And for myself, one of the most valuable things that I've developed is confidence and belief in myself and my own value and worth. And that reflects in every aspect of my life. But I think that's come from connecting to a deep, deep trust in myself and the intuition, inner wisdom, and spirit that I know is always partnering with me to steer me in the path of my greatest potential. And for my kids, it's been fantastic to see them grow up and now carry some of these, many of the things that I worked on personally and taught them now forward into their lives. And then in my work, just similar to you, it allowed me to transition out of a career I'd been in for 15 years that had served me well, but just wasn't aligned with the next phase of my journey. And most of all, by the time this podcast episode is released, I'm going to be living in Mexico, which has been a lifelong dream of mine, to kind of pack up all my stuff into storage and wander the world a little bit. So that's it. So we should point out, this is one of the last podcast episodes being recorded in my studio in my house, which literally is in the middle of being packed up and moved out. So
yes. And that's all the things you described, I think, can be summed up in courage. Just amazing courage.
Well, thanks for being here today, Janet. It's a fantastic conversation. Don't forget to go take the quiz or schedule a call with me so we can talk and get you plugged right into the best space possible. And until we meet again, I hope the time that you've spent with us here today has enriched your day, your week, and your life, and that you are walking away better, more informed, happier individual because you've spent some time with Janet and I today. So have a great rest of your day ahead.
Thanks for being here. If you have a topic or question you want to hear more about, send it to us at the email below. Have an inspired day.